This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 2, Episode 23 of the Jumblethink Podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast. We explore the ideas and dreams behind some of the leading entrepreneurs from around the world. Along the way, we will give you some tips and ideas of how you can chase your own big ideas and dreams and change the world around you. Our guest on today's episode is Cary Burkett. More about Cary in a moment. Our guest on Monday's episode is Captain Jim Palmer. It's going to be a lot of fun, so make sure to check out that episode. Do you like free things? I think you probably do, and we want to make sure that you're connected with some free resources at jumblethink.com. We now have 2 free guides. The first guide is how to know when you found your dream. And the second guide is how you can overcome the unknown. All you have to do to get your free guides is to swing on over to jumblethink.com/guide. Again, that's jumblethink.com/guide. Now let's join today's episode with Cary Burkett. Hey there, welcome to the Jumblethink Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host and so excited about today's episode. It's going to be super fun. Before we jump into the episode today, I want to encourage you, wherever you're listening to this podcast, click that subscribe button. If you're streaming this through the Jumblethink website, I want to encourage you, find one of those links. Maybe it's iHeartRadio or Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Click that button, take it over to your favorite place to listen to podcasts, and click that subscribe button. That way you never miss another episode of the Jumblethink Podcast. While you're there, make sure you check out some of the past episodes with other amazing guests. I am so excited about today's guest. His name's Cary Burkett. Before we dive in, I need to give you a little bit of a backstory here. I've known Cary for a big chunk of my life, probably since my early teens, maybe even before that. It was because him and his wife that I got to know the theater and the world of theater. They were involved in a church that I went to growing up, and just incredible people. When I started this podcast, I created a list of people that I was like, these are people I really want to get on the podcast. And Cary was on that list. Today, you get to experience what I've experienced and learn why Cary is such a special guy. He's done amazing things. He's worked in the world of comics. He's worked in the world of theater. He's worked for NPR. He's done so many different things. And now he's on a new adventure back in the world of comics and creating animation. It's super cool. And I think that his story is going to inspire you. I know it really inspires me. It's a story that I've wanted to make sure that we tell here. So let's jump into this conversation. Let's learn a little bit more about Cary Burkett.
About 30 years, and I've been an actor before that, and right now I am the producer of a series of animated cartoons based on superheroes that I created back when I was a kid. And that, having retired from all my previous activities, that is where my focus is these days. The stories that I appreciated, the kind of stories that I appreciated when I was young, in some ways it's like, going back to my childhood. I go back to the things that inspired me, that I feel like shaped me in some ways, and I try to craft those into stories that will connect with somebody. And then I animate them using software and actors and all of the other equipment that I need, and put them on the web for people to watch. And I began to play with little toy cowboys and Indians. And the whole process of creating stories with these little men, we call them, with soldiers, cowboys, whatever they were, it became something that just drew me like a magnet. And it really was the starting point for most everything in my life that happened afterwards. It's like when I was into theater, it was still the same kind of effort of telling stories, even though we were doing it a different way. and writing comic books. It was the same kind of process, and refined, hopefully a little bit more sophisticated. But all through those things, going into radio, I did radio drama there, a similar kind of thing, and learning to communicate with the voice through the radio medium. All of those things were a part of this big thrust to tell stories, to bring out different ideas and emotions through that avenue. So that was the start of it. But I didn't really know until I retired and had time to think about it, how to bring it all together. And the animation seems to take something from everything of my past and bring it all together and put it into a kind of a capsule so that each piece and each aspect that I've learned over my life kind of plays a part in this new endeavor. I would call myself significant, but I do think that there's a purpose in what I do. I think that the purpose is a God-given purpose, and that it relates to communicating and inspiring, encouraging, and just sparking people in different ways. I'm not sure that it is something that has a profound impact, but I think it plays a part. I think that everything you do, every little choice that you make, is significant in its way, in that it shapes you in what direction you're going. And I think that's what I'm hoping my stories do, that they can have an impact. I've had people, I wrote comic books years ago, and I've had people call me up or send me email and say, I read this story of yours back in 1983, and I just want to tell you, it really enjoyed it, it entertained me, and I've never forgotten it. And that kind of, it gives you a sense that, okay, somebody somewhere got it, So in small ways, that's the kind of impact I think I like to have. Learning the technology. I have learned how to tell stories. I know how to create scripts. I know how to work with actors. All of that is stuff that I been there and done that and enjoy it. Working with software and creating little 3D animations is a real challenge at times. Getting them to move naturally, getting the characters to have life and personality from the screen, that is challenging. And dealing with all the technical issues of converting from one format to another format, all the technical aspects, they really do stretch me at times. Now I'm in my retirement, and my main goal is to fulfill the flow that I feel. When I'm working on it, I just want to get into the flow of it and do the best job I can. I don't have a long range plan. I'd like to see people that appreciate this kind of story and be able to latch on to it and enjoy it and maybe communicate with me, but there's no real big overarching goal that I have for this project.
We'll be right back with our conversation with Cary Burkett. I have a question for you. Do you ever sit at work and you start daydreaming about the thing that you really want to be doing? Maybe it's a new career or a big idea for a new startup. Or maybe it's that bucket item list that you just can't get off your mind. Maybe it's writing a book or creating a short documentary. Well, no matter what it is, Jumblethink is here to help. We would love to help you take that daydream, that idea, that thing that you've always wanted to do, and give you some tools to make it no longer a dream, but a reality. The first step you need to do is swing on over to jumblethink.com and drop us a note. Let's start the conversation. Let's see how we can help you take that dream, take that big idea, and start making it a reality. Again, swing on over to jumblethink.com and just drop us a little note, and let's start the conversation. Now let's jump back into our conversation with Cary Burkett. Cary, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming over and taking time to share your story.
It's fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
You have been a influence in my life throughout my life. I think back to some of the Christian theater that you did back in 90s, and being involved with that, and I'm sure putting up with me as a kid running around having silly ideas.
You were great. Yeah.
And so you have kind of an interesting journey and story. You started out in the world of comics, and you did theater. You still do a lot of theater. Went into
Less theater. But
less.
Yeah.
Went into the world of NPR and public radio, and now you're in your years that you get to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your journey and your story.
Okay. Well, I'll start out by telling you a story that of how I got interested in comic books, which was a key moment in my life.
Yeah.
It happened when I was 9 years old. I was already interested in storytelling and on some level. I love to read, and I love to take my little men and make up stories and things. But on my older brother, he's 2 years older than me. His birthday is 1 week before mine.
Wow.
And on his birthday in 1960, I was 8 years old, I found a dime.
Wow.
And that was pretty big. A dime is not, riches, but it was pretty significant in 1960 for a kid to find a dime in my particular situation. But it was my brother's birthday.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what? I'm going to give this dime to my brother.
Wow.
For his birthday. That was a generous, a generous moment.
Yeah.
And he was so touched.
Yeah.
He was like, no. But I gave him the dime. He then took that dime. My birthday's a week later. He took the dime and bought for me a comic book.
Wow.
They were 10 cents at the time. He bought a comic book called Justice League of America #1.
Okay.
Which is today a valuable comic book. It's not.
Do you still have it?
I do have a copy.
Okay.
Yeah. And he brought me that comic book, and it was like, whoa.
Wow.
Here are these superheroes around a table. I didn't know who they were. There's a red one. There's a green one. They were like the Knights of the Round Table in their coat of arms, and they teamed up and they went out to fight evil. And I was the perfect age to be sucked right in to the superhero comic.
Yeah.
And that started it for me. After that became, I had to get all the other comics. I became an avid reader, became a collector. After a while, you reading them is less important than collecting them. But
right.
On through high school, I collected them, and partially into college, and so that was like there. It was like this young passion. I started my own fanzine in high school where I would publish. We had a little mimeograph thing, and I would publish my own comics at that point. So that was the launching point for me in stories, and I feel like God set that whole thing up. I felt like He did something in me to give me a generous spirit, and then He brought out of it something that would be a very significant part of my life.
And you ended up working in the world of comics for several years.
I did.
Created characters, one of them being Nemesis, which I think a lot of people are familiar with actually now. And
well, I don't know. He was never a major character. Never been in any movies or films or he wasn't a cartoon. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, and so you worked for people like DC Comics and Marvel and Red Circle Comics, and you worked as a writer and editor. Tell us about that journey. What was that to work in that industry in a time where it was still a powerhouse of the traditional comics as you read them through a book, not comics as you see them on TV or on movies.
Yeah, or on the tablet or whatever. But it was, I love comics, and I had all this history in my head. I knew all the stuff about all the Marvel characters, and I was in college. I majored in theater. That was my passion. At that, I'd left behind comics a little bit, and I was pushing for the goal as to be an actor. That was my goal.
University of Texas, Austin, right?
That's where I graduated from. Yeah,
Okay.
I went to a couple of other schools first, but I graduated from University of Texas, and toured on with a number of different theater companies, assembly tours, bus and truck tours, summer stock. I did that for a while. And then I thought, I got to go to New York.
Okay.
That's where the actor, everyone goes to New York. So I went to New York, and I thought, I got to have a job.
Yeah.
Because an actor doesn't make any money, especially when you're starting off.
Right.
I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could work at a comic book company?
Okay.
Maybe write comics and make a living doing that while I'm out auditioning.
Yeah.
So that was my goal. And I walked into Marvel Comics and said, hey, I know all about Marvel Comics and I know how to write and blah, 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 blah. I published this fanzine. They said, thank you, but we don't really need anybody right now.
Yeah.
So then I went to DC Comics. It's same thing. But the guy said, do you know anything about the artists? I said, sure, I know all the artists. I know who they are. I can recognize their styles. I can recognize who the penciler is, who the inker is. He said, I have a job for you.
Okay.
And he gave me a job taking all this original artwork from DC. They just started a new policy that we're going to return all of this artwork to the artists.
Wow.
But in order for it to be done, they had to go through their warehouses and they had to sort through it, figure out who had drawn it because there weren't credits kept. All that kind of stuff was not available. And it all had to be stamped and copyrighted so that even though they owned the art, they didn't own the right to publish it. DC is keeping that right.
Yeah.
So that was my break-in.
Yeah.
They said, you can recognize this artist just by looking at it. You know, that's Steve Ditko, or that's Kurt Swan, that's so that kind of thing was just natural to me. I knew them all.
Yeah.
So that worked out. I got the job and began to work, and eventually began to toss ideas for stories to the editors, and began eventually to start to write as well.
Wow. So kind of that old school story of a little different, but of sweeping your way in.
Yeah. A particular skill that gets you in, and then it's just a matter of keeping your face around and knocking on the doors.
So as a writer, as a editor, as you've transitioned into that role, how did you approach story and narrative, whether it was writing it or reviewing it as the editor? How did you approach that? And in the world of comics and beyond, when you worked on plays and other things?
When I was in the comics, I was doing Superman and Batman stories, and the audience was sort of a transitional audience. There were older people who would read the comics, but there were a lot of kids back then who were reading comics. Comics originally were mainly for kids, and then they kind of expanded to older crowds. But I was always very aware that there were a lot of kids, young people who were going to be reading comics. So I wanted to, that was sort of a guiding principle for me, to make sure that what we put out there was going to be positive.
Yeah.
It was not going to contain messages that would lead young people into, weird ideas or whatever.
Right.
So
probably needs a little bit more of that filter nowadays than imagined.
That back then there was a Comics Code Authority.
Oh, wow.
Which would, this was started in the 50s. The Comics Code Authority would check each comic, and there couldn't be any cursing, there couldn't be any kind of un-kid friendly stuff in it. And I took that seriously. I really a lot of the writers and editors I worked with were like pushing the boundary, trying to push it, be a little more risque, be a little more, as it always is. There's always that push to try to just, break out of it.
Go a little bit further than what's typically accepted.
So that was the trend. Certainly we've seen
where that
has led us. But I was the conservative guy who was saying, my nephew's going to be reading some of this stuff. And, there's other people's nephews out there and nieces. There's more young men that read them than women. But so that was a key point for me. Story-wise, it always starts with the characters. It always starts with, who are the characters?
Yeah.
If the character is Superman, it's one kind of story. If it's Batman, it's a different kind of story. The characters create the impetus for the action, their decisions propel whether, what they decide, and is based on who they are.
Yeah.
So that's a key starting point for any story.
Right. You've after working in comics, you transitioned in the world of you did off Broadway.
Off Broadway.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
And you've worked in that space, and then you transitioned into NPR. There's a common thread, though, across all of this is NPR is known for crafting stories, plays and musicals and things like that, obviously are telling a story. Comics are definitely telling a story, and probably one of the biggest outlets that is mass consumed now via TV and movies. Tell us a little bit about how narrative and story is significant. I think that people don't often think how that narrative and story can be even applied to their own life, especially as entrepreneurs and business owners. There's numbers and systems, and sometimes they miss that story.
Well, I think as all humans, we are geared to tell stories. We tell stories about everything that happens to us. When something happens in the day, we tell somebody about it. We're telling a story about it.
Yeah.
And in the process, we're shaping, really, our memory of it.
Yeah.
We're going to remember more the telling of the story.
Right.
Then we're going to remember the actual details. There's scientific research that supports that.
Yeah.
That people's memories are shaped by reliving what happened and adding that narrative to it, that structure, so that it makes sense to us. This happened, and then this, and this was caused by this, and then, so that's the way our brains work.
Right.
And that's the way we perceive our realities. We tell stories to ourselves, even if we don't tell them to other people. we do story our lives as we go along. I'm doing it right now. But so the narrative thrust is just strong. It's just strong in people, and if you can connect with that, if you can connect and bring people to, are sucked into the story itself, then you can make a connection. Yeah, and that's the importance of it. That's the power of it. Yeah. The impact of it, and what drew me. And I, as an actor, when I was in the stage, I loved being on the stage. I wanted to be an actor, and I would do any kind of a part there was just to get on the stage. Yeah. In my early years, but as I did more and more of it, I began to realize, wait a minute. What's happening is I'm doing someone else's story. Right. And I may not really like the message of that story. Yeah. It's fun to be on the stage and be a part, but I'm actually telling a story that I don't agree with the message of this story. Right. And so I had to step back and say, I can't just do any role. It may be fun, but I really have to look and see what is the message that's going out. And I've always felt like if you're telling a story with such power, you have to have an integrity so that you don't lead people astray. Right. And so it has to be natural. It has to be yours. It has to be something that you believe in. And so I that's sort of why I backed away from acting to some degree. Why I got into Christian theater, where I was doing my own stories and I was pointing to the faith I had in God. Yeah. And the importance of that to me, I wanted that in the story. I didn't want to leave that out. Right. In the comic books, you're not doing anything like that. Yeah. And that's okay. That's fine for what they are. Yeah. There's still elements in those stories that point to faith or point to something that's outside of humanistic atheism. It's there. It can be there without being full blown evident. But I wanted to do stories as well that really spoke, that had a evangelistic aspect to them. Right. So that's what was kind of that transition. Yeah.
We live in a time where stories are getting diluted. And I love the fact that what you were talking about there was like the integrity of the story you're telling. And it has to be authentic to you. And you have to be able to resonate with that as an actor or as a writer. You have to be able to step into that role and really walk through that. And we live in a time right now where whether it's the perception or reality, whatever it is around news, or whether it's how information is presented online, that there seems to be a delusion or a diluting of the message and knowing if it's authentic or if it's true. Can you share a little bit about, as a person, whether they're telling the news, whether they're telling a story, whether they're communicating their message as a business, how we can begin to bring that honesty back that you were talking about and integrity in the story we're talking or sharing about?
Boy, that's tough. I don't have an answer. I don't have a solution for that. But I mean, I've worked with wonderful people in the news group who were very honest people, who worked very hard to try to present accurate information.
Yeah.
And they did the best they could.
Right.
But we're human beings.
Right.
And whatever our experiences are, and whatever stories we have, they inform how we are viewing events.
It's our world bias.
It's a human bias.
Yeah,
We all have it. It's not something that you can escape. Whether you're a Supreme Court judge, whether you're a scientist, there's no way to escape the fact that you are perceiving things through a not an infinite filter. You have a set. You have a set of things. Yeah. So you do the best you can, you know, and I, you know, there are those who don't care about that, who just want to get up there and you know, put out something.
Looking for clickbait to get people to read a story that has no value.
And that's going to happen. I mean, I don't know how to, so that conflict is going on, and you just have to, you know, find those people who you trust. And there's, you know, there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. You know, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Throughout the interview, it's come up time and time again. Faith is such a significant part of your journey, specifically a Christian faith in Christ. And has faith always been a part of your journey, or how has that been a foundation in that journey along the way?
Yeah. I think like a lot of people, you know, you grow up with a certain thing and you believe it because that's what you're taught as a child.
Yeah.
That was me.
Okay.
And then you grow up and you get older and you begin to say, hey, wait a minute. Is this all true? And you meet other people who have different viewpoints and they influence you. And so you start questioning, you know, this is happening at I don't know, for me it happened after I left high school and was away from home, went to college, and suddenly I'm in this theater world where the values are different and the ideas are different, and my views, parents, and my little world seems very small compared to all this other stuff. So that was my common, you know, it's a common journey for many. It was my journey. And then at some point, you reach some point in your life where you through a crisis, through some events, you make a choice.
Yeah.
You make a choice, and it's not your mind really, I think, that makes the choice. It's your heart. It's your the other side of your brain, if you will. It's not the analytical side, although the analytical side may justify your choice. And they find all these reasons, but it's the other side that's really choosing and saying, I'm choosing this, and my choice came. You cannot scientifically prove God. You cannot scientifically prove there is no God. Because science, as it is not, science contains itself to the natural things. Therefore, anything outside of that, it doesn't have any really way to approach it.
No relevance to the story that they're involved in.
So at some point, it has to be faith or non-faith. And you make that choice. Your heart makes that choice. And then you justify your choice. Boy, you know, that's the way I view it. And that's the way I feel it happened to me. I feel like at some point, my heart said, I want faith. I want something. I want a destiny. I want a purpose. I don't want there to be nothing. I don't want there to be just an accidental random. I can't see it. I can't, I can't believe it. I see all the things around, and I know there's something inside me that testifies that all of this is here for a reason.
Yeah.
And so that's, my heart goes in that direction. Somebody else comes in and says, well, I just, there's so much evil and there's so many bad things. How could, and I just, and so their heart fails.
Yeah.
And that's the way I see it. Then they go down into the belief that there's nothing.
Yeah.
This nihilistic viewpoint of life. There's nothing that exists. There's no destiny. There's no purpose.
Right.
And so you got to choose your side. Those are the only two sides, really.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I know everything about. I mean, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
But that's, in terms of theological leg pinnings, I couldn't justify a lot of things.
Right,
I don't. It's a heart issue for me, and I could be wrong about a lot of things, but there's a core there that I resonate with.
Yeah, that's really good. So how does that inform you as you do these different outlets, whether it's theater or anything like that? You talked a little bit about it and how you were starting to choose roles that were informed by the faith and the things you believed in. How does that become a foundation for everything else that you're doing? Or does it?
Yeah. At some point you make that choice, and then you just go deeper.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that it's a journey without difficulty and challenges to your faith, because we all go through difficult times.
Right.
We all face heartbreak.
Yeah.
There's no one of us escapes having a dream crushed.
Yeah.
And so if your faith is built on your dreams, then it's going to fail.
Yeah.
It's going to fail. You've got to come. That's when the faith gets tested and refined. It's called the refining by fire.
Yeah.
And it's like, all the straw and all the human things about it that, oh God, I thank you for getting me this wonderful acting job. Now I believe in you. No, when you don't get the job, God is still there.
Yeah.
When you lose that important thing that you thought you had to have, then God is still there. So he brings you to those points.
Yeah.
And you've got to let your faith be refined. And I've been through my part. We all have. There's nobody who doesn't go through that. So that starts to inform what you do, and you begin to, sometimes just by putting your will to it and saying, okay, I don't see a way forward here. But I'm going to stand on my faith. I'm just going to stand on my faith, and that's when you grow.
It's the power of the lament, saying life is horrible, it has fallen apart, and yet I know that God is still good. Does not make sense sometimes.
Does not make sense. I can't figure it out. We want to story it. We want to story it, and we want to make God a certain character, and he's got to act this way, and we don't quite have the quite have the brain power to do that. So.
You recently retired from NPR.
From WITF,
From WITF, the local
NPR affiliate.
Your voice is missed there, although we get to hear you in Harrisburg still from time to time,
Once in a
which
while.
is
Go
a
back.
beautiful thing. I know that the people over there were heartbroken and excited for you.
Oh, yeah.
And you're on this new journey. You were sharing before we jumped on the interview about how you went through a season. I think you called it your a season of gray or something like that. And out of that, you found new purpose and destiny, and you launched something new. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, most of my time at WITF was not spent in the news side. It was spent announcing classical music.
Yeah.
I had a program of presenting music, and when I started that, I wasn't a classical music fan. I was an actor, and I knew how to pretend like I knew. and I would play the music, and it'd be like, it's kind of dull, But day after day, hour after hour, I was hearing it, and it just really kind of rewired my brain. And I began to really like this music. There are certain symphonies by Beethoven and Bach, who was my favorite. They began to speak to me in powerful ways.
Wow.
And I began to see, I can use this.
Wow.
Because this music is powerful.
Wow.
I can let it into the world with intention, that it will go out with power, and that was what was behind my whole effort there. I was trying to, and I would get phone calls from people who would say, thank you for playing that beautiful piece of music.
Wow.
I just was visiting my mother in the nursing home, and I was feeling terrible and feeling like I wanted to jump off a cliff. And then this wonderful music came on, and it just transformed my day. And I'm thinking, yeah, thank you, God. That was what I was praying for and hoping for when I was doing the music. And I felt great about having that job. It was really a good fit for me. Then after, we changed the format, we got rid of the classical music, and I shifted over into the news.
Yeah.
And news with a sort of an asterisk. I was more on the arts and culture. I wasn't a hard reporter. I didn't do the capital beat or any of that. I was a reporter, but I was more the softer side of news, which suited me fine.
Yeah.
I could still work towards doing something what you're doing, finding people and finding out their stories, and bringing them forth. So that part of it was a good fit for me. But I miss the music, I have to say. And I don't know. There just came a time when, I began to be a news announcer, I would read the news. I wasn't really a reporter, but I would go on and I would read the daily news. And the daily news was always horrible.
Yeah.
There was always some scandal, some political scandal. There was always some plague. There was always some war. There was always something horrible that was happening. And day after day, I'm just giving this out and giving this out. And I just, a part of me just kind of went dead.
Wow.
I began to feel like my joy was gone.
Yeah.
I felt like I had no. It became very gray. It was really a depression.
Wow.
And I couldn't take interest in anything.
Wow.
Everything that I loved to do.
Yeah.
It was like, well, I don't really want to do that.
Wow.
Nothing. That's kind of what depression does to you. It just evens you out. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're down and incapable. At least not for me, but it's just like you're living in a fog.
Yeah.
So that's where I was. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to retire in a few years. And what will I do then? I'll just sit around. I don't want to watch any of these stupid TV shows. I don't want to do any, I don't have any. So I just began to pray about it. And I said, okay, I used to love to draw comic books when I was a kid. That was what I found that would give me fun. And so I forced myself to start doing that.
Yeah.
And try to recapture some sense of fun about it.
Yeah.
That then eventually, after doing this, and I'm creating this comic book using Photoshop and tracing figures and stuff, it was therapeutic for me. It gave me something to do. It gave me a project that wasn't related to my work. It wasn't related to anything. It was just something I could do for mainly therapy.
Wow.
And it began to spark a little bit. I began to get interested in the story. I thought, well, I could make this story really something that could have some message to it. So that became the spark. Then a guy came and said, hey, a friend of mine who was part of this story I was passing around different ones. He said, you should look at doing animation.
Yeah.
Doing animation, getting this. So I said, it sounds like it would take way too much time. And I'm not going to do that. I'm having enough trouble learning Photoshop, And he said, Robert, they've got these animation software programs where you just put in this and then the computer kind of animates it for you. And well, I'll take a look at it. But I took a look and I was sucked in, line and sinker. I just felt like, wow, look what you can do. You know, I had not really seen
Right.
the increase of technology in this area. It is
Yeah.
just so
It's crazy.
phenomenal
Yeah.
what can be done on a home computer. And so that just, buoyed me and really broke me free from really, I guess, 4 or 5 years of just depression, that I've been walking through. God helped me through it. I have to
Yeah.
say, he never left me. He was always encouraging me throughout that time.
That's really cool. That's called what? Redbird Visions?
Redbird Visions is the name of my production company, and redbirdvisions.com. That's the website where you can go and see the episodes, and you can read about the boring story of how it all got got launched.
That's really cool. I've watched, I think you have, 2 or 3 of them out now?
I'm up to 4 now.
4, okay.
Yeah.
I haven't caught the 4th one yet, but I've checked them out. It's
They
very
get
fun.
better. They get better. The first one's pretty rocky. Like I'm just learning this stuff, and I'm like, oh, gee, I've got it up on YouTube, and it's kind of, but it's getting a little better. The animation, everything is starting to work a little bit smoother.
So you're in this new season of doing this, and the Redbird Visions, which is very cool. A lot of people that may have been in your shoes, hitting retirement, and, they kind of just settle into a weird phase of their life where they just kind of watch TV. Not everyone. No, that's a bad blanket statement, but a lot of them don't have purpose past retirement. They've done their time at work. They've, maybe they spend some time with the grandkids, that kind of thing, whatever that looks like for them. If you were talking to one of those people that's hitting retirement and they don't have a vision or purpose for the future, what would you tell them?
I'd say that they were created for something that is not over yet.
Yeah.
They haven't finished what they've been called, what they've been reasoned they were put here.
Yeah.
And that what they have ahead of them is not something they will hate, it's something they will love.
Right.
If you can find what your calling is and move into it, then you are going to find explosions of joy, explosions of energy.
Yeah.
All of that is there. But you have to work at it. You have to work for it. You have to take some steps. And praying is a great way to open some doors. If you're blocked in some way, and you can just seek God and say, hey, you made me. You are the one who decided to put me here. What is it you have for me?
Yeah.
Just asking that question will spark some kind of opportunity, I believe.
Yeah, that's very cool. Before we pivot into our rapid fire questions, is redbirdvisions.com the best place people can find you? Is there some other places they can connect with you?
No, that's the best place. It's on YouTube. You could search for the name of the series is Those Who Walk in Darkness. So you could search for that. But really, redbirdvisions.com will take you to all the episodes, and it's the
Very
best.
cool. Well, we'll put those links in the episode notes, and we'll be right back with Cary Burkett and our rapid fire questions. So you started a business several years ago, and it's been going well, but you've hit a plateau and you don't know how to get to the next level. Well, Jumblethink is here to help you. We've worked with other businesses to take their ideas, take their dreams, to give them strategies and tools to go from one level to the next level. And we'd love to help you. What you got to do is swing on over to jumblethink.com and drop us a little note on our contact page. We'd love to start the conversation with you and get your business from where it is today to the place you want it to be. Now let's jump back into our rapid fire questions with Cary Burkett. We are back with rapid fire questions with Cary Burkett. Cary, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I'm ready.
All right. The first question we ask is, what is one tip you would give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Find out what you love. What do you love? Find out what that is and start from there.
I love it. That's so good. What is one change you would like to see in the world?
I'd like to see more positive news reported in the media.
Okay.
As opposed to all the negative news that's
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. That's got to be hard to work in a situation where all you get is the bad. You get like the worst outtakes of everything.
Yeah. I watched something on Facebook, and it was like, here's all these stories that you never heard about, and they were all positive stories of things that were great that had happened in a like a period of 6 months or something, and I never heard of any of them. I work at an NPR station, and I'm hearing all the plague and Ebola stories and everything like that, corruption and scandals, but all these other stories.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness I saw them on Facebook.
Yeah. What do you want your legacy to be?
I'd like to be remembered as someone who fulfilled a promise of his life.
Wow. That's so good. It's simple, but it's powerful. You know?
Yeah. Well, some of us are made to do great things. Some of us are not. Some of us are made to do simple things that have a great impact.
Yeah.
What if to be a father is a tremendous impact, no matter, whether you achieve status in the real world. So I don't mean that in any grandiose way. Just whatever the promise of my life was, I want to fulfill it.
I love it. I love it. Where do you find inspiration?
I find inspiration through prayer, through reading about people who've gone through difficult times and struggled to achieve them. I saw the movie of Winston Churchill about his recently, and really inspired to see, he was certainly not a perfect person, but, he stood up for what he believed in, and he stood strong in the middle of difficult times. And that kind of thing is where I find inspiration.
I'm going to change this question up a little bit. Typically, we ask, what is one book you think every dreamer or entrepreneur should read and why? But instead, I'm going to ask you, what is one book that you found just that has impacted you and why?
One of the books that impacted me was Don Quixote. Okay. Famous Cervantes novel, and it wasn't really through the book, but it was through the play that I came to know about this story, the story of this man who was really judged to be insane because he saw things in this grandiose, romantic way, but his vision led him to a nobility that he would never have achieved without it. And I just, that's been a powerful story in my life.
Yeah. In this new season of your life doing Red Bird Visions, what's one tool that you're finding that helps you be successful in doing that?
It's the encouragement of my friends and family. My wife is just, so encouraging, and the people I work with, the other actors, are so excited and glad to share in this whole project. So that's really a great benefit.
What is one habit you find helpful in your life?
Not to give up. When you come through those technical things, well, two things: not to give up and look for help when you need help. Find the help. I go online when I'm dealing with some animation problem that I can't solve, and usually I can find somebody who will give me a little,
It's so cool, the time that we live in. There's a lot of bad things about technology. Yeah. But that is one of the cool things, is that it's so easy to get an answer to something like that. We deal with it all the time in the world of code, but in animation, I can see why that would be similar.
There are forums and things you can join, and these people are much more knowledgeable than I.
Yeah. Now, this has probably recently changed since you retired, but how do you start and finish your day?
I start by walking my dogs. They have their routine. That has to be happened first. They've got to be fed, and they've got to be walked. And then I will spend, the morning is a good time for me to work. So I will spend 10 minutes sitting and just seeking God. Yeah. And then to work. And that's the morning's really the best time. I finish my day, I'm pretty well just diddling with stuff, I'm not, I've done my major work, and I just have tweaking things or things that don't require a lot of, brain effort. Yeah.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I think I'd be involved in some way telling stories.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what, but I don't think that aspect of my life would change. I think in some way I'd find some way to be involved in telling a story.
That's so good. That's so good. Before our final question for rapid fire questions, it's my favorite question to ask everyone. It's, what is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life? Could be anything.
I'd like to see a revival. I don't have personal achievement kind of dreams. I don't really, none of that. There's nothing that appeals to me that, I'd like to be in Broadway, or I'd like to do this, or achieve this, or I just win this award. None of that has any real attraction to me. But I would like to see, I'd just like to see a shift in the way the culture is moving. I'd like to see it moving in a different way. And that's not something I can achieve, so I'm not sure that's really a good answer.
I think it's a great answer. I said it could be anything.
Okay,
I mean, and we've gotten random things. I think that's one of my favorites, so I love it. Before we wrap up today's episode, what is one last thought you want to leave us with today?
That you have a destiny, that there is a plan for you, that you have a purpose in your life, that nothing that we experience really matters except fulfilling that destiny. Whatever difficulties, whatever heartbreaks, all of that pales before what we are to do, because we live here 70, 80, 90 years, some people, but we have ahead of us something we can't conceive of really in eternity.
Yeah.
And we're preparing for that. So that's the thought I would like to leave.
Cary, it's been a lot of fun. It's great to reconnect with you after all these years, and I think you not only tell great stories and communicate well, but you have lived and continue to live an inspiring story for so many.
May it be. Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank today's guest, Cary Burkett, for taking time out to be on today's episode. This was one of those interviews that I've wanted to do since day one of the podcast. So it is a dream come true for me to have him on and share his story with you. As always, you can find links to his website and social channels in the episode notes. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to encourage you to learn from Cary's story. In his youth, he did incredible things and had an amazing journey. And if you're starting your career, I want to encourage you, don't settle for less. Go really push into those things, those big dreams, those big ideas you have, and see where they lead you. Now, on the flip side, if you're in your golden years and you've retired, but you've given up on life, you were living for one day and now one day's happened, well, it's not too late. I encourage you, get out there, do something to chase those big ideas and dreams. Whether it's to travel the world or start the next venture, it's never too late. And I want to encourage you, just because you're in your golden years doesn't mean that young people like us don't need you. It doesn't mean that the world has forgotten you. What it means is that you have lots of wisdom and experiences that we need to experience, that you need to share, and an impact that you can have on the generations to come. Whether you're young, you're middle-aged, or you're reaching the end of your days, I want to encourage you. Go chase those dreams, those big ideas, and change the world around you. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. Now, it's up to you. Get out there, do something. Make one step today to move that big idea and dream forward.
Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.